Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Dragon's Breath Bow Wow, welcoming you back to another episode of Arkan's Adversaries, Luggnum's Day of Reckoning, Part 2. The worst day in Hive Movis's history, for real, for real. A mild recap of the last video, as this is a part 2, I won't be going over the entirety of it, just the important parts. Now, on the evening of the day of the Emperor's Ascension, there was a food riot due to a couple of reasons we went over in the first video. Hive Movis is the ground zero for this event, and it is the focus of a majority of this campaign so far. It is a mushroom-style hive, and it has two major mining hubs, one inside of the underhive and one outside of the hive entirely, outside of the hive entirely, and it is also a deep lithosphere mine designed to go deep into the earth to pull out a ton of iron. Now, on the side of the internals of the hive and the underhive, they've been put under curfew, meaning that people cannot leave, and they've been restricted in where they can work, get food, and move around. After 3 days, or 2 days since the actual riot, and as a result of the unfortunate massacre that happened on Spillway 9 in our last video, the Arbites and PDF have both gone out to deal with their own problems. The Arbites have gone down into the underhive to discover some unfortunate realities that happen when you live in the Imperium. Apart from their poor decision-making and their very, very bad luck, we have another force going out. Now, on the day of the Emperor's Ascension and the 2 days afterward, the local police have been sent out to oversee mining operations outside of the hive to make sure that there will be no issues. And thus far, there have been no issues. People have been coming to work, they have been working, they've been doing this relatively consistently for 1 day, 2 days, and then on the morning of the 3rd day, people realized that the police are no longer there. They showed up at some point, and they simply disappeared. It's not exactly clear where they went. They checked in for communication at one point, and then they never came back the next day. And so, on the evening of that day, as none of the police have shown up and communications have been down for at least a full 12 or so hours, a large group of PDF troops are now being deployed to the mine to identify where those policemen went and why communications have been down. What is even more concerning is that some of the miners haven't left the mine. Now, it's fairly normal for miners to be at a shift for almost 12 hours at a time. However, what is not normal is that miners stay at work, especially overnight. Now, it might be somewhat explainable by the fact that the underhive is closed down and you cannot access it at all times, so some people might have been kept away from their homes, but it wasn't that small of a number. It was thousands and thousands of workers who stayed overnight in the mine and in the adjoining barracks rather than going back home. And so the PDF have also been sent out to figure out why this is, and especially that is the case with some of the abhuman workers, who are not allowed to stay out all day and all night at the hive, at the mine, even if they are working. So, Mineshaft Delta-2 the day after. The workers, after the Spillway 9 massacre, are still glad to work in the mornings, but there are more and more discontent as the days draw on. Now, for a full day, 24 hours, there are no real problems. People go to work, they mine, they check in, they're under the direct supervision of the police, but again, the police are not riot troops, and they're not the Arbites. They're not the people who these miners are mad at. The miners are upset with the Arbites, and also technically upset with the planetary government for a large number of reasons, including blaming them for the riots starting in the first place. Eventually, however, the work crew foremen call a halt to work about 20 to 30 minutes early on the 2nd day. This is an abnormal action, and it draws the attention of the local police. And a unit of around 1,000 of them, who were already at the location, deploy into the mine to find out what the hell the foremen are doing. And so they go down through the mining town, out of their monitoring area where they're keeping track of any traffic to and from the mine. They now go into the mine, as work has seemingly stopped early for no reason, and they want to figure out why that is. To their surprise, Pt.2 in its entirety, the entire work corps, several million men, are not underground working or lazing and loafing about the work camp. They're waiting for them, en masse, in rows and ranks of unorganized, dirty, filthy, and quite upset miners. And when those police get underground, realizing how many miners are apparently stopping work to watch them come closer, they start to get a message. And this message is, at first, an unintentional, a body language thing, an understanding reach with the police. And then, after a few of them start to try and get the workers back into work, well, it's a very verbal message that comes back to them from several individuals who are bearing a strange icon. You've seen what they're doing. Now you have a choice. You saw what the Arbeites did to both our abhuman-friendly workers and to the other miners who work with us. They massacred them. They slaughtered a bunch of us, and we are going to do something about it. To the police, join peacefully, or die. Now, violence is not something that these people want to do, and the police, while they are strikebreakers, they have never experienced a strike that reached this many people this quickly, basically overnight, an entire massive work crew going rogue, and in fact going full rebel in some cases. But they are not outwardly violent. They certainly aren't ambushing the local policemen and trying to murder them. Why? Of course, that would be the most logical thing to do if you wanted to have an uprising against the planet. Well, that's because that's not the point. The point is not uprising, it's not rebellion, it's the Arbeites, and to a degree it's the planetary it's the Hive's government as well. They see what has happened, they see the massacres, they see they see it as a withholding of food, that original event that started the food riot, they see it as a withholding of food by the local government, and thus a veiled attempt to punish or injure or even possibly to lower the amount of workers by killing them off, and they're not happy about it. But why aren't they upset with the policemen? The policemen are the ones who break down strikes and any type of small coal or mine riots that happen. Why aren't they upset with them? Well, it's because the police are locals. They are family members, friends, allies, buddies, work crew members. Some of the people who are working at the mine are ex-police officers in a lot of cases, because the police on Hive Movis and on a lot of Imperial worlds are just sourced from the local population. So it's neighbors and friends telling you, come on, join or die, we're getting this thing done. But what could have done this? There are plenty of uprisings, but none of them ever get this big this quickly. What could possibly have united a work crew of over 3 million men, women, abhumans, and various other types of individuals, including the mine's actual overseers and foremen, in this way? Well, it is the Luggnum Liberation Movement, the LLM, whose icon is the blue butterfly, the cobalt butterfly as it is. The Liberation Movement, the police were not aware of how many of that 3 million work crew were on board with the Luggnum Liberation Movement. However, before that massacre, it's reasonable that they didn't understand that, because before the massacre, the Luggnum Liberation Movement did not exist. No one, even the people who were at the mine that day and who are now apparently on the same side as the Luggnum Liberation Movement, even know what it is. They've never heard of the Luggnum Liberation Movement. They have absolutely no idea what it is. If you'd asked them the day before the massacre, they would have absolutely no clue what this organization is. The movement seems to have sprung out of nowhere, calling for improvements to the lives of the hard-working miners. They want full days off, they want actual food, they want apologies and reparations from the Arbeites for the people who they've killed, and many, many other demands that are fairly typical for a free workers movement. Now, the Luggnum liberation movement is mysterious, and the fact that it simply jumps up overnight, with some people so absolutely loyal to it that they're willing to threaten hundreds of police officers into silence, well, that's rather odd. However, their argument is clear even if the group's origins are not clear. The people of Luggnum are loyal to the Emperor. They are loyal to the Emperor, and matter of fact, they're loyal to Luggnum. They love their planet, they love their mines, they love their labor, and their ability to work and provide for the greater Imperium. The problem is that the Arbites and the structure of labor on this planet prevent them from properly worshipping and properly being loyal to the Imperium. Essentially, the planetary government and by extension, the Arbites and by extension the planetary government, their actions have threatened and weakened and ruined the relationship between labor on Luggnum, and specifically Hive Movis, and the planetary government. So they've drawn themselves into this problem. And this prevention of proper worship and loyalty means that something has to be done. Peacefully, if possible. If possible, that is. And that is where the police come in. Most of them willingly lay down their arms, or at least get out of the way of the Luggnum liberation movement. A lot of these workers are not necessarily armed with weapons, but they are armed with industrial tools, and since a large number of them are ogrins and other abhumans, yeah, the police quickly realize how insanely outnumbered they are, and with even the foremans, the mine operators, and the various other higher-ranking officials at the mine not being on their side, surprisingly, they have no chance of getting out of here even if they choose to stand and fight. The shift's mascot, the cobalt butterfly, is adopted as their insignia, and fairly quickly a couple of them mark their uniforms or helmets with this blue butterfly symbol whose head is a mining hammer. It's a nice, pretty Celtic knot symbol that you will see later on. So, now the police have gone quiet, the communications have gone out. In this case, we now know why the communications have gone out. The mine owners have simply turned off communications. They were preparing for this, not necessarily uprising, more like usurpation of authority, long before it actually started. However, the PDF are sent out, as previously mentioned, to figure out the information behind these details. And by 8 p.m., they get pretty close. They get to the outer edge of Pt.2's mineshaft and into the aforementioned work-living area. PDF troops, armed with the M40 Armageddon autogun, a very capable autogun, able to fire both semi and full auto, arrive, and they travel the roughly 6-mile distance from Movis's Hive skirt out to the mineshaft entrance of Pt.2. Now, they don't just walk on in and start moving around. They do take a period of time to try and contact and communicate with the police. There is no takers. None of the information from the various radio positions or even from the security position that the police had is responding to them, and after a few minutes, and really after about a half hour, the PDF troops have searched for the police everywhere, and they've checked the communication lines, and they've realized the communications are not knocked out, and the police are simply missing, along with all of their equipment. So by 8:30 p.m., they arrive at the mine, and they are welcomed. A group of miners, seemingly chilling from the evening out and getting ready to leave, though a remarkably large group of miners, gladly welcome this large group of PDF troops into the entrance to Pt.2's mineshaft. However, it does not take long before an argument breaks out. The workers know that they're in the wrong here. They're not supposed to be sleeping in the mine, they're not supposed to have ended work early, and they can't really answer where the police have gone because several of those uniformed officers are actually standing with the miners, smoking and shooting the shit until the PDF get there, trying to remain as calm and relaxed as possible and hoping that this can all go down peacefully. For the moment. However, this argument, it lasts only a couple of minutes. The absence of communication and the fact that the police are here and yet they don't seem to be engaged in their active job, well, it pretty easily spells the point to the PDF that something is not right here and they need to break up whatever is going on immediately. It only takes 4 minutes before the first group of PDF level their weapons and order the miners to disperse. At 8:34, several of the liberators from the nearby working area shantytown detonate 400 pounds of blasting charges in the middle of the PDF deployment zone. They had essentially pre-dug a massive pit and filled it with explosives at a place where the PDF were very likely to lodge. Now again, they didn't intend on any violence, and to be honest, only a few of them actually know about the explosives being planted because they've been there several days already. This has been a planned operation, not a sudden ambush or any type of spontaneous movement. This was a planned ambush, and it had been planned for weeks in advance. A minute later, and basically up until 9 o'clock, the fallout from this explosion will be basically an active conflict. 8:35 to 9 p.m., the PDF force and the miners clash in the mix of smoke and chaos. Mining weapons, rifles, vehicles, pistols, and the mad strength of abhumans meets a bunch of shell-shocked PDF troopers. 500 of the PDF troops were sent out with the detachment. Many of them are killed instantaneously by the explosion, which strikes 3 separate units of 100. However, there are only about 350 miners and ex-police officers willing to stand up and take up arms against the PDF. Each of these groups basically represents 100, while the smaller group of ex-police officers are in the security area. Now, the explosion scatters these 3 central groups, and the 2 outliers who are less affected by the explosion immediately charge into combat. The first group, that had been face-on with Delta-2's mineshaft, basically is split into 2 different directions as they try and hold the mouth of the mineshaft and attack a group of 100 or so loafing miners that have been hiding behind some spoil heaps. Now, again, these miners are equipped with pistols at the absolute best, and a vast majority of them are just equipped with pickaxes, sharpened shovels, knives, and large pieces of rock if they are particularly dumb abhumans. But I think we all know how deadly a large boulder is when it's in the hands of an ogryn. So, this group is hard-pressed immediately as over 250 miners rush their position, and they are absolutely shredded within a very short period of time. Now, it costs a whole bunch of liberators in order to do this. They are getting shot at by fully automatic autoguns, and even though they are able to make the charge in a short period of time, and they have the advantage of surprise, not all of them were actually aware that things were about to kick off, and that explosion, while it certainly does signal that it's time to get some fighting going, they weren't necessarily ready for it. Some of them were. It's a little bit interesting. You know, if there are certain things, if you're watching an explosion in kind of CCTV camera, the people who don't turn their heads towards the explosion, those are the suspicious ones, and it looks like a lot of people knew that that explosion was going to happen, but not all of them. So some of them are taken by surprise, some of them aren't. It's a bloody fight at the very front there, but those main groups in the back, especially this central one, basically gets shredded in half by the explosion, and they are thrown back immediately, and in the chaos, the gunfire, and the nightmarish conditions of a close combat with all of these abhumans and bulky miners, they flee. One of the only 2 groups that managed to make an organized push is the group inside of the shantytown. They are much better trained and organized than the miners, and they managed to push out and destroy a large group of miners and liberators who were trying to use the houses as cover. However, that is really the only single-handed success that the PDF manage, and even they are forced to flee after causing heavy casualties to the liberators, because this flanking maneuver over here to the north also meets a large group of miners, and with both sides having cover, and with 3 other units of PDF being knocked out, the remainder of the PDF are forced to surrender by about 9:02. More and more and more miners pour out. That initial 350 rapidly swells to over 700 plus armed and unarmed miners who are irate and expecting different things. Some of them are under the impression that it's the PDF who caused the explosion. Others of them were well aware of the explosion and have been lying in wait to try and get their hands on PDF weaponry so that they can kill more soldiers, while others are simply terrified of a cave-in or a collapse, and they spill out of the mine where they had been loafing around and relaxing while they waited for things to develop. So all in all, the PDF lose many of their numbers, and the rest of them are forced to capitulate and surrender, and are taken as prisoners by the liberators. The Delta-2 ambush is brutal, and it results in the absolute full domination and occupation of the Delta-2 mineshaft work camper, now renamed as the Liberator's Encampment. Now, the Liberator, the liberation of Luggnum, or sorry, the Luggnum Liberation Movement, or the symbol that they have, the cobalt butterfly, becomes the icon for this little encampment, and they organize themselves pretty quickly, taking as much equipment and gear from the Fallen as they can, and securing the mine by any means necessary. As mentioned, there are 3 million workers. So the Luggnum Liberation Movement officially occupies the work camp and the entirety of the Delta-2 mine deep underground. Almost 3 million workers, willing or not, are now living within the mining town, with several hundred of the PDF, or the unwilling police officers, as hostages, using them for a lot of different political things in future, but we'll talk about that later. These miners, 3 million of them, it says willing or not. Some of them were definitely not up for the level of violence that they just witnessed, and while some of them were forced into it by either peer pressure or self-preservation, a lot more were aware and were hoping that there would be some level of violence. And so they are quite happy to realize that what they had expected and what they had been hoping for, an opportunity to hit back at the man, so to speak, has arrived. And they have equipped themselves with a decent amount of weaponry now. From the 500 PDF troopers, 300 rifles are taken. A large number of the rifles that were caught in the explosion were too damaged to be salvaged. And also, a lot of the PDF troopers expended all of their ammunition, basically hitting very little in the smoke and the nightmarish conditions of the post-explosion ambush, leaving only 300 rifles still serviceable with enough ammo for a couple of engagements. In addition to that, out of the 1,000 or so police officers, 600 of them turned over pistols, while many of the miners also had their own pistols, and they have subsequently gained about 900 of those firearms total. In addition to that, there are 2,000 heavy close combat weapons for these minor rebels. Most of these are, again, sharpened shovels, pickaxes, and other various heavy, again, not really combat, they're close combat weapons, I guess, but it's more like mining weapons for Ogryns, or mining tools for Ogryns. So, a couple of axe rakes, a lot of heavy sledgehammers, and picks. And then an equal number of lighter close combat weapons. Again, a lot of these are from the police. We're talking about knives, billy clubs, maybe a stun baton or two, but an equal number of those. And they've also secured the vehicles from the mine site, including a lot of heavy industrial vehicles. In total, about 5,000 workers can be armed, including the 3,000 abhumans. Now, the abhumans on site are basically a large portion of the adult abhumans that exist within Movis's hive, at least part of them, or they represent a number of families equal to a large portion of them. And it includes Nightsiders. Most of them are Nightsiders, so roughly out of every 10, 7 are Nightsiders. Then out of them, the rest are a mix of Ogryns, mutants, and beastmen, with a pretty heavy emphasis on Ogryns. There's only a couple of hundred mutants and beastmen total, and those mutants are relatively tame. They're just like people who are albino, or people who have incorrectly colored eyes, or something of that nature. Maybe an extra finger. That sort of stuff. With the chaos going on in the Hive, aka the Gene Stealer uprising, that is causing problems and silencing the Astropathic Choir, as we mentioned in our last video, Movis is at a bit of a stalemate. They have an active civil uprising on the outside, and they have a Gene Stealer infestation on the inside. How are they going to deal with these uprisings, or will they be able to deal with them now that a unit of the PDF have been slain and an entire section of one of their most important economic sections of their entire hive has been captured by enemies? So the real question is, what happens next? The Luggnum liberation movement is on the warpath. They've mobilized 3 million men, and they've armed 5,000 of them. Granted, more of them are armed with melee weapons than are armed with ranged weapons, but they do have quite a few rifles and pistols. So we'll have to see, and you guys will give me your opinions in the comments here. That is the end for this one. We are going to do quite a few votes in the next few minutes. I'm going to get this video up, and we are going to get more and more out of this campaign. I was happy to do it in a split manner, and I'm sorry that it's been a little bit accelerated, but we will continue, and this is going to be a great thing. Love these low-level civil uprisings. You guys voted, and we are going to do them. I love civil uprisings. They're really fun. Miners' strikes and work strikes and all that type of stuff is really, really fun in 40K. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed. You know, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But go and vote, and I will wish you all a lovely good night.